Please come forward. And then I ask that what we're going to do, I think I briefly outlined this morning, but that felt like a long time ago. Microphone 3 and 4, ladies. Right here, microphone 3 and 4. Microphone 3 and 4. No, there you go. So what we're going to do this evening is I'll just start off with our two female youth representatives. They're each going to be given 5 minutes to speak. And you know when you're drumming and lead drummer does this, lets you know it's the last push-up? When I do this to you when you're speaking, that means you got 1 minute to wrap it up. All right, so it's just borrowing something from our traditions to give you an idea. That's your last push-up, that's your last minute of your 5 minutes of speaking. Afterwards, we will be taking some questions from the floor. And what we're going to be doing is alternating. So they're going to get the same question. So for example, if Angela went first to speak, and in fact you are, and then Adina will second, then that means that the first person to get a question will be Angela, but then the same question will be given to Adina, and they'll go back and forth like that. So just take a little bit of time to get to know. First, allow them to express why they wish to come into this role, and then you may have some specific things that you would like to know about them. On that note, speaking about this being a candidates forum, I would like to introduce you to our electoral officer, and I'll let him speak a little bit about himself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Marcus Hadley. I have the honor once again to act as electoral officer for the BCAFN. This year, as you probably know, we have a number of positions open, including female youth representative, 1 position. We have 4 seats at the board of directors with 6 candidates. And we also have the position of regional chief with 2 candidates, Maureen Chapman and Terry Teegee, for that position. I'll just deal with a couple of technical housekeeping issues, and then I will get out of the way and allow the All Candidates Forum to continue. So polls open tomorrow at 8 a.m. bright and early, so I hope to see you all there at 8 or 10 after 8, and we will close the polls at 10. Now, when I say we're going to close the polls, if you're in the line, if you're in the queue and you're waiting to vote, I'm not going to slam the door in your face, but please don't show up at 10:15. The polling station, there will be signs, but the polling station is located on in a little classroom just down the hallway here on the left-hand side. And if you have any questions about where that is or the time or what you need in order to vote, please ask me or ask any of the BCAFN staff you have here. The only other technical thing I want to point out is the board of directors. There are 4 positions, but 2 of those are for the remainder of an existing term. So 2 of the board members will be for terms of 1 year. 2 of the board members will be for terms of 2 years. How we're going to sort that out is those candidates who received the first and second highest number of votes, no surprise here, will get 2 years, and the third and fourth place candidates will get 1-year terms. If there is a tie in any of the votes, there will be a second ballot, and I will let you know if there is going to be a second ballot. I hope to make the announcements with the polls closing at 10 sharp. I hope to make the announcement either before or at lunchtime tomorrow as to who the successful candidates are. That's all I have to say, so I'll hand it back to the All Candidates Forum here, and hope to see you all tomorrow bright and early. Thanks.
So I'm just talking briefly to the ladies, but I'll say it for everyone. We're going to actually call them forward one at a time here to the podium to present for the 5 minutes. Again, the drum will be the 1 minute signal of wrapping up. And then from here together is a place where you can take questions, and we'll make sure that you have paper and pens and things for jotting down notes. So with that, we're going to start off with Angela Charlie. Just give me a minute to get my timer started. Pardon? I just need a minute to get my, just give me a second.
Oh, good. Lao, Acewell, Selyaltanat Telsqui, Talitaqua, Temusquium, Testaelis, Huamquam Squalwell, Equala, Atel Squalwell, Qualsquitzlala, Telowel, Thala, Tehuelap, Aticias. I'd also just like to acknowledge the traditional land territory of Musqueam, and just like to say hi to all the chiefs and the other delegates in the room, and shout out to my family for supporting me today. And I just stated in my language that my Huelmuch name is Selyaltanat, and my English name is Angela Charlie, and I come from Staelis and Musqueam, and I'm very strong and proud of who I am and where I come from, and I'm filled up with good feelings to be here. And I'd just like to say that I'm a very strong and cultural person, but I'm also in university, and through my studies, I'm working hard toward becoming a social worker, and I'm in my second year of the social work diploma program. And through my studies, I have actually become very educated in a number of First Nations issues, and it's actually kind of lit a fire of passion to continue on in this field. And we talked about a lot of issues today, from multi-generational trauma of residential schools and colonialism, and that's what I aimed my main points and objectives if the successful candidate. And some of those points were health and mental health, such as suicide and depression, the overrepresentation of children and youth in the child care systems and criminal justice systems, drugs and alcohol abuse, and violence, domestic violence and violence against women, and also the underrepresentation of First Nations youth in the education systems. And what I heard a lot from my elders is that us as we only do what we know, and I would like to be an advocate of change in breaking the cycle of violence, alcoholism, drug abuse, mental health issues such as depression and suicide, and in return, and empower our youth, and especially young women like myself, to be Huamquam Squalwell, to go out and receive a quality education and empower young ladies to fight for equality in the workforce and in leadership roles. As we take a look around the room, we see a lot of First Nations women taking on those leadership roles in those communities, and I am very honored to be standing here and speaking in front of all of you today. And we come from a very strong matriarchal culture, but we're living in a very patriarchal society. And sorry. And I would like to take advantage of all the female leaders in the room, as they are paving the way for young women like me and Adina to be the next leaders and to make our mark in today's society. With that being said, I would just like to state my goals and objectives if I were to be elected. And my main focus was on First Nations culture and language revitalization and empowerment, First Nations health with a focus on mental health, depression, and suicide, First Nations education, and also rekindling family and cultural connections for our children and youth in care, and especially those who are aging out. And also with a focus on ensuring and sustaining funds to run these programs and run these services for our First Nations youth and for our First Nations people. And In conclusion, I would just like to express how honored I am to have my name in the running, and I'd like to thank Angie Bailey for thinking of me. As our youth take up such a large population, it's a big honor and a big responsibility to be considered to be their voice and be their advocate. I'd also kind of just like to acknowledge Adina for being brave and standing up here with me in front of everyone here today. And I'd also just like to say, Yakyak Kusai. Thank you, all of you, for your time. It was a great honor to speak in front of all of you today, and good luck to all the candidates.
Nine seconds left on the clock. Congratulations. Please come forward, Adina.
I'm a little shorter than Angela, so. We're good? Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Angela, for your good words today. Hakskwal tanoya pansayam, nuksotsa teseyai, yakwa ilas kuyan kushaman, Adina Williams kuyan sna, chanwa skahomistamoch. Chiefs, leaders, friends, and family, it's an incredible honor to be standing here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the unceded Musqueam territory that we're on and thanking our Musqueam hosts for being such wonderful hosts to us today as we do our business. My Kwakwakiwak name is Yakwa Ilas. My English name is Adina Williams, and I come from the Squamish Nation. I also descend from the Namgis Kwakwakiwak peoples from Alert Bay. I'm a fourth-year student at the University of British Columbia, UBC, where I'm studying political science and First Nation studies. I'm a public speaker and a media spokesperson. I'm running for the role of female youth representative because I'm aware of the various concerns and ideas that First Nations youth in BC have, and I believe I have the experience and the strong voice and the passion to bring these concerns and ideas to the BCAFN leadership as well as to the greater community. I've been lucky to hold a large number of leadership roles locally, and most recently I held a national role with Canadian Roots Exchange, where I was a youth reconciliation leader, and I got the grand opportunity to learn from a variety of Indigenous voices from across Canada, but particularly here in Vancouver and in BC. And recently I've attended an Indigenous Youth Symposium that brought together over 70 First Nations youth leaders from every region in this province. And it was at that symposium where I became aware of the various concerns that mattered to First Nations youth in this province. And so I'm coming in here with the goal of representing First Nations youth in various areas that they have outlined, but with particular focus on education, health and well-being, and language and culture. And why I've chose these are, one, because these are areas that I've commonly found are of utmost concern and importance to First Nations youth in the various roles and symposiums and gatherings I've been at, and two, because they embody a holistic model that promotes the healthy balance that many First Nations youth are striving for themselves and for their communities. And so just in a nutshell, in education, some of the main points that come up are creating safer and healthier communities in our schools, whether that's on reserve, off reserve, in our K-12 system, so that our children and our youth can learn in a safe and caring community, and hopefully encouraging them to pursue a higher education at whatever capacity that may be. And also land-based opportunities and cultural awareness that they can be learning in their own communities. So creating those opportunities for youth. In health and well-being, I think that's a really big one. Finding ways that implement and promote healthy physical and mental well-being, as Angela reinforced in her speech, that it's very important that our children know that those support systems are there for them when they're struggling with their mental health. I've been there suffering with depression in the last few years, and I have come past those hard times, but I do wish that more First Nations youth were able to access those services, and so I hope to be an advocate there. Beyond the individual health of our youth is also the health of our lands and our waters. Right now in the traditional territory of our Coast Salish here, we're fighting the Kinder Morgan pipeline, and I know of many First Nations youth are aware of that, as well as fish farms. They're aware of the importance that those have on us and on our future generations. And so in doing this, I hope to reach out to as many First Nations youth as I can, going in here understanding that the First Nations youth is not a homogenous one. We have youth on reserve, off reserve, urban, rural, remote, two-spirit youth, youth in care. All these voices bring such valuable contributions, and I hope to represent them very well. So I can't stress enough how dynamic First Nations youth are in this province and in this country, and I really hope that I can represent these voices well. And with that, I humbly ask for the support of all of you, of course not without wishing the best of luck to all candidates in every category that we're electing in. And Angela, I wish the best of luck to you and acknowledge the very hard work that has brought you here. I'm very proud to stand beside you today. So with that, okay, I raise my hands up to each and every one of you. Hoichka Gela Kasla.
Do you need a pen? I'm trying really hard not to be proud, Auntie, but I'm so proud of these ladies. Yeah. Serious chair voice here. Just a couple of things. One, thank you both for your presentations and respecting the time. What we're also going to do with the question and responses, as you have seen here, we do respect time limits as well. So when we are taking questions on the floor, it's generally around 3 minutes. I'm not going to give you a 1 minute signal because it's going to be distracting, but I'm going to let you know at the 3 minute mark and then just give you a little bit of time to wrap up for something. So I'm not going to make you stop mid-sentence, but just out of respect of the questions. And as you went first, we're going to have you take the first question, and then Adina will take the second question, and then we'll switch it back and forth. So whatever question is coming from the floor will be repeated, so you can make note, but also know that the next question, if you weren't the first up, the next question you'll be the first up. So as Angela, you went first, you get to take the first question, and then we'll go back and forth. So we're just looking, okay, microphone number 8, please. I may be repeating the question as well, just to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Thank you. My name's Aaron Sam, and I'm chief of the Lower Nicola Indian Band. My question is just being involved in what you see at these meetings and what you see what the other chiefs are doing. What's the one thing that you, as a young leader, both of you are young leaders, what is the one thing that you think that us chiefs that are, for the most part, not youth anymore, what do you think we could do better?
I think that was a pretty straightforward question. Holy hot seat! All right, so microphone number 4, please.
So it's a very broad question. One thing that I think maybe that we can do better as chiefs is maybe bring together the youth more often. And seeing as we are maybe the youth representatives, maybe we can have delegated people who are on youth councils or something come into these meetings and maybe have a say in who gets to be their voice for the Assembly of First Nations. Is that a good, does that answer?
Yeah. Excuse me. Is this on? Okay.
Yep, microphone 3.
I'd just like to echo what Angela said in bringing in the youth. I recently had the grand opportunity to attend the BCAFN and First Nations Leaders Gathering, and every First Nation had the opportunity to bring a youth representative there. And there was a good handful of us, but I would like to encourage more chiefs and councillors and leaders to involve their youth. It's, you know, youth have such valuable contributions to bring to every conversation that is taking place here. I know because I've met so many First Nations youth who have contributions in lands and resources, in housing, and health, and education, and so on, language and culture, what have you. And so bringing your youth here, and whether or not they want to speak, just the observational piece to learn about, you know, how does the politics play out in these gatherings of chiefs and everything. And so I think it's of utmost importance to involve your youth. I commend the Squamish Nation for always bringing in youth to critical conversations that are taking place in our community. And so, yeah, I fully agree that the youth need to be here to either observe or have the opportunity to speak to these issues. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you. So the next question will be going right back to you, Adina, just so you're aware that the next question will be directed to you. And then, yeah. So we'll take another question from the floor. Microphone number 13, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the Musqueam territory we're on, and thank you so much for standing up. Maureen Chapman, Chief of Squalth. The topic of ending violence against women and girls is ongoing. It's improving slowly, far too slowly. And my question to you, from your fresh eyes as young ladies, it sounds like you live in a very healthy environment. What is a suggestion you could give to help this process along? What message can you give that might break through that people aren't hearing from us? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So microphone 3, please.
Thank you, Chief Chapman. In regards to ending violence against women and bringing these hard conversations into Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, I think education is imperative here. You know, these are really tough things to talk about, and I know that in some cases these conversations can be avoided because of the emotional triggers that can come up from these conversations, and how so many of our families have been personally affected by violence against women in our communities. And so whether that's educating our men, our brothers, our fathers, our uncles, whether that's bringing in survivors of violence, I know that has been most influential in me in learning about violence against women. I mean, I'm not a direct, I don't know necessarily people who have been outspoken on that issue, but I do think that those testimonies and the education of this plays a large role in helping us move forward together and helping us understand what we need to do to fix these issues in our communities. So, thank you.
And also, I would just, is it on? Yeah. Okay. Also, I would just like to add to what Adina was saying about education is educating our people about the stigmas that women have. You know, there's a lot of shame and stigmas placed on our women who do get abused and are subjected to domestic violence. So educating on how to treat women. Like I said before, we are a very matriarchal society, and we hold our women up to the utmost regard, and we need to implement that maybe in our school systems, and going back to culture and who we are as a people, and implementing that into the school systems.
So I'm looking for one more question from the floor. Yeah. Which microphone are you closest to, Grand Chief? 18.
Thank you. I want to really congratulate the two young ladies. Both of you are very well spoken and very thoughtful in your approach and your opening comments, as well as answers to the questions. I really want to congratulate you on how you opened your presentations. You spoke your language, you acknowledged in your ways. We have a challenge in this province and globally. We lose an Indigenous language about every week globally. What would you do as a youth to help inspire our young people in our communities to become, to take up the learning and the speaking of the language to a level of fluency that would keep our languages alive into the future? Because many of us here, when we're gone, we're really probably among the last generation of fluent speakers, and when we're gone, we're going to have if we don't do something now in working with you, we'll have lost our languages. So I'm just looking at the question around what youth can do and how you can help inspire youth to be able to speak our respective languages, whatever it's Salish or Hunkaminam or Daket. Thank you.
Thank you. So that goes back to Angela. On microphone 4, please.
I think to inspiring youth is just getting that cultural awareness out there of, and empowering our youth. I talked a lot about that in my speech, and just getting into the school system sooner and earlier, and in just enforcing the many different languages of the Khwelmuk people into school curriculums at a younger age. And we have, in our school systems now, we have French immersion classes. In my university, I could sign to speak Punjabi, I could sign up to speak Russian, but we also have Halkamelam courses that can be offered, so even in higher levels than the school. So I would just like to, just by encouraging other youth and empowering them and letting them know that it's okay to be First Nations, and it's not something to be ashamed of. So just instilling the language in the curriculum at younger ages. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Language, of course, is at the core of who we are as distinct Indigenous peoples, and our cultures and our identities are really embedded in those languages that we speak. But youth they have the drive to learn these languages. I think it's more about creating the opportunities for our youth to be able to learn the languages. I mean, I know many of my peers that I grew up with just completed a whole year of learning the Squamish language in a fully immersed environment, and it's been so amazing and incredible to hear. I'm on the bus and they're speaking Squamish language to each other, or they're writing it on social media so that the greater community can learn these things. So I'd like to see more of those. I think those are imperative for us reclaiming our languages. I also believe that language courses in high schools and everything are very important. I didn't have that opportunity in high school, so I appreciate those opportunities. Also, I think one thing that's critical in this is promoting intergenerational learning. So having our youth interact with our elders, because as you said, Chief John, that our elders and our generation are probably the last fluent speakers, and so it's really important that we get that those systems going in our communities where our youth have access to our elders, and whether that's at a community center or in a school setting or what have you. I think that will promote the advancement of us reclaiming languages as our Indigenous languages. So thank you.
Thank you very much to both Angela Charlie and Adina Williams for your thoughtful presentations and responses to the questions. We look forward to the results. We wish you the very best of luck, and we're all very proud of you for standing up. Thanks. All right, at this time, I'd like to call upon the 6 people who have put their names forward to serve as board directors for the BC Assembly First Nations. I ask that you join me on either side. What I will be doing is, because there's 6 names, we won't be taking questions forward. We're just asking each of them to do a 5-minute presentation, and they're going to get the same drum signal at the 4-minute mark. And we're going to be going in alphabetical order. So it's my pleasure to call forward Chief Willie Blackwater.
Amatilsu. Doris Inisum, Dachum Hetwaysun. Tumlese Quidimly Willie. Election ni she has, I mean, Jewish way, Will Jabach was which we get sent. Lachabu. Chiefs, matriarchs, and honored guests. My name is Jewish. I come from the house of Jabuch, the Wolf clan from Gitchan Nation. I'm also the elected chief in Gidjayukla. I am a humble man. I don't talk too much about myself and my accomplishments. But there are times such as this that I'd like to share my vision, my accomplishments, and my work that I've done. I've been taught by elders, the matriarchs in our nation, and my late father to always acknowledge those that come forward and help you move along. So it's my personal honor and privilege to acknowledge the following chiefs and First Nations who believed in me by nominating me as a candidate for one of the board of director seats. Deputy Chief Victoria Russell of Gidjayukla First Nations, Chief Robert Sampson of Glenville First Nation, Chief Joe Bevan of Kitchelis First Nation, Chief Maureen Chapman of Swillock First Nation, and Chief Karina Lewin of Chislata. You'll notice in my biography that I've done a lot of work helping our community. And that's one of the key things as I learned as a newly elected chief in 2015. I'm on my second term now for a 4-year term, is that you need to acknowledge and include whoever it is you're working for. In my case, as a chief for our community, we've been in third party for close to 2 decades. So with the inclusion of community, within 2 years, we got out of third party and now in recipient appointed advisory. Also know how to communicate is one of the key things in leadership. Transparency needs to be, everybody needs to know what's going on. Accountability, one of the most important things is respect of what it is that you're doing, respect for the people that you represent, and respect for the children, the women, and the youth, because they are the most critical part of our life in the Gitchan Nation, because we are also from the matriarch system. So it's my honor, my privilege to be here, hoping and humbly asking for your commitment, as I will have made commitment to doing the best that I can with the abilities that I've gained as a board of director for BCAFN. One of the key things that I've learned in my long healing journey is that what I think is the primary key to my success is that you can't help others if you're unwilling to help yourself. So I've done a lot of healing, did a lot of personal trainings and stuff like that. I'm currently in Choices because that's another place where I'll gain a lot of tools to make a better leader, not just as a potential board of director for BCAFN, but a better leader for my home community. Thank you very much. I hope I get all your support tomorrow.
Thank you. With a minute on the clock. All right. Next, I'd like to call upon Cookby Daryl Bob.
I sat on the far end hoping I'd be last. Thank you all for this beautiful day. Inches kniet was kaum. Chachlik kookby moet a sletlium. Hoskes slapnum, chuas katlin klakmel skatla. Chuas katl moet an chakmel skatla. It's Amos Atskontin Snoha. My name is Chief Daryl Bob from Chachlip in Statlium Nation. My Indian name is Khnitwachkaum, means shadow wolf in our language, given to me by the elders back home. And I'll open by saying this. I won't promise you nothing but hard work. Because if I promise something, it's just lip service, and I don't believe in that. You know, and that's just the way I approach things. I've always approached it like that. It's just hard work. So, you know, when we look at the abilities and the movement, you know, I'm blessed with a beautiful gift. I've always been said that. The most beautiful gift I was given right now at this moment in time was having the opportunity to meet each and every one of you today. That's the way we're raised, with a cultural foundation. Without a question, we can't swing from. It's through the eyes of our ancestors that we see the future. Because if it wasn't the eyes of our ancestors, we wouldn't be here today. That's the teachings, the foundation. That's nationhood. We're built upon families. We're built upon family ties, family systems that tie us as nations together. And we look at our culture. What a beautiful culture we have. The amazing representations we have. And I raised my hands to those two youth that were here. That was amazing. I know we have a good future when I see young people like that. You know, our family systems, we have to create that opportunity again to bring it back to our communities. That's hard work. I always say in a good way that how we treat Mother Earth is a reflection of how we treat our women, our mothers suffering today. We need all the helping hands that we can get to come together to look after her. We need all the men to stand up and hold our women up with honor, to ensure that they're looked after in a good way. Without a question of a doubt, that's our responsibility. You know, I asked an elder one time, what does a warrior mean? This was right after the 1990 roadblocks in Lulwood. And she pondered for a second. And she says, you know what a warrior is? A warrior is a man who goes and fights for the land and the people. And when the fight's over, you put that down and go back to looking after your family. And I look at that. We're going through changes in our growth as nations, as communities, as families. We have to continuously fight for every inch of opportunity in economics. And I raise my hands right now to all those people that are doing that, growing their communities to the best of your ability. Oh, he, oh. Back home when you raise that drum, that's the last. But I got lots to say. I didn't even get around to introducing myself here, you know. Back in Statlium, yeah, that takes 5 minutes in itself. But I just want to thank all the people that nominated me, the host nation, all the people that are here in attendance. I want to thank you all for coming together. And if you support me, thank you so much. And if you don't, I understand that too. You know, at the end of the day, all we can do is work our best, do the best to the best of our ability, and let's continue to thrive as Uchalmich. As Uchalmich. not Indigenous, Native, First Nation, nothing. Each one of us has a language that says we're people of the land, and in Statium, it's Ukalmil. Nilti, Takamid Snook, all my relations. How's that for timing?
Cookshan Callett Cookby, I'd like to call upon Chief Harvey McLeod.
Waikashkal Halti Peace Nixil. My name is Harvey McLeod Elmichum, Upper Nicola Band, Okanagan Nation. I'm always thankful for the people and the leadership that host us and give us opportunity to share, listen, understand, come together. And I thank Musqueam here today. I've talked to a few of our almichums, a few of our chiefs about directorship. We are in a time of change, big change. Being involved with council for 20+ years, I can remember the big duty and responsibility of a chief in council was to look after social assistance checks to where we are today. I've talked to some of our past chiefs back home, and they look at the duties and responsibilities of a council today versus the times that they've served. And it's different. Different in that we have a lot of challenges in front of us. As we grow and expand and come to accept who we are, where we want to go, the challenge comes, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get there? I have a little biography in a kit. Shows you some of the things that I've done as an individual, my work history, etc., etc. But that was made possible by having loving parents, siblings that you cared for, that you loved, that I loved, that I've seen struggle. And all of us have faced that. My parents were res school. All 8 children of my mom and dad were res school, including myself. As a young man, my goal in life was to work hard and play hard. And hopefully Colin Chuten, the creator, will say it's time for you to come home at a very young age. Very angry man. But the work and responsibilities of being the oldest in a family, Colin Chuten says, no, that's not going to be your role. And then becoming a parent to 2 beautiful children. Seeing that and knowing that things are going to be different. I have to change. So with my change, I've seen the world in a new way. And I come here today, my peers, leaders that I respect, and ask that you see me for who I am, and know that I come here with no big resume of solving world problems or anything like that, other than a gentleman that has a heart and a willingness to work hard for this organization, for our people back home, because it's them that we sacrifice our lives so that their day can be better today and that our children can have a better tomorrow. So with that, I thank you for listening to me. White Limlet.
Thank you very much, Chief. Chief Susan Miller.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank Musqueam again for opening their home to us and allowing us to do this very important work. I've had the privilege of being on the board for the last 2 years, and it's tough work. They said it was going to be easy when I started, and that's not true. So I'm not going to lie to you and say it's easy, because it's really not pretty, but it's so worthwhile. I don't believe that anyone who's put their name forward or any of the chiefs sitting here would want to be part of something that isn't going to benefit every single one of our people in our communities. In my career, I have only ever worked for First Nations, and I wasn't raised at home. I was raised in foster care for 17 years. And when I came home, I wasn't welcomed home. Not by my family, not by my leadership. I have had to fight for over 30 years to become who I am. And I can't speak my language. And I don't understand all of my culture. But I show up every day, and I learn it, and I try to practice it. And I will say a word or two where I'm able to. But those inherent rights as a child were taken away from me and my siblings at a very young age. And a lot of that is that's systemic poverty that we suffer in our communities. And when I become part of a change, it's because I believe that all of us collectively can pull all our people out of that. But there's processes, and there's policies, and there's guidance that needs to be done, and there's leadership that needs to be held up to do that work. The first regional chief I worked with was very dynamic, but had a vision that said, we need to share this work. One person cannot do it in this assembly. And the next acting regional chief I worked with said, I can't do this all by myself, I need all of you. And our staff show up every day regardless of the things that get thrown at them, and they're committed and they're dedicated. My role as a director is to help them see through every day. My role as a director to help the regional chief, whoever that may be, come tomorrow morning at 11 or noon, is to provide that support to help guide and sometimes take the place when it's needed. When I had the privilege of attending the national executive meetings a few weeks ago, to sit there and see those regional chiefs that don't have support of a 5-person board of directors, that are managing 1 and 2 staff. I don't understand how they manage to do that, because I see in BC how incredibly hard each one of us have to work every day to get this work done. And the one thing that I'm very open and honest about is that we're not a mirror of the UBCIC. We are not a mirror of the summit. We are part of that and we are partners. But the BC Assembly has a purpose, and we need to follow that in our Constitution, in our bylaws. We need to change some more things. We should have a secretary and a treasurer and a vice president. We should have all those things so that we could build our economy and take our rightful place and get the fair share of our resources that all of our leadership is working towards. So when we become mayors, I will be the first person that says, that's not what I signed up to do. Because when I come to UBCIC, that's what I need the guidance there for as the chief of my community. When I come to the summit, that's where I need the guidance for that piece. We can't all do the same, and we shouldn't be doing the same. And I will challenge you, I will challenge myself to keep working towards that change, and it's going to take time. This morning during the governance session, that's just the very first tiny little layer. And it's going to become more interesting and a lot more fun. And I'm really privileged and honored to be here. I thank the chiefs again that put my name forward, and I wish all of you the very best. Looking forward to tomorrow on my relations.
4 seconds on the clock. So I'd like to call on Chief Charles Morvan, please.
Simgigat, gan Sudam Hana, gan Shanix, Scuba Wilsit, gan Scuba Git, Scots, Nidum Doyak, Samagat Laha, Inamta Masat Gun Law. Today, I'd just like to thank the Creator for bringing us here together today as we discussed business that is in relation to our people. I'd just like to thank the people that nominated me for this position and the roles that I'm going to play on your behalf should I be elected. One of my experiences that I do have is in economic development for my community. Also have vast experience with the financials and fiscal responsibility that I bring to my community that I'd like to share with the people around this table. I'm one that really looks for partnerships. I really like to see our First Nations come together like we were back in 2009 that we've drifted away from. I'd like to also bring my experience in the area of fisheries where a lot of our communities are lacking. We're losing our fish stocks. I come from a First Nations that every year we have a commercial opening, we have recreational fishing and domestic. We manage our own fishery, and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans takes a lot of advice from our program. And I'd like to bring that to each of the First Nations from my experience, from working in the field to being the chair of the First Nations, the Nisga'a Fish and Wildlife Committee. And I'd just like to offer what I've learned through the experience that I've had from other leaders such as people like Ed John and Doug Kelly and Maureen Chapman, just from observing how they carry out their leadership and the way that they represent our people. And that's what I'd like to bring to this table. And that's the way I've been brought up from my people, in the way that we share our knowledge with others. When we see those that are lacking, we try to pick them up so that we're all walking together. And this is what I would like to do. And I want to work with a leader that respects the women's right, that wants to bring the woman up to the level as where the men are, so we're walking together as equals. And that we have parity in everything that we do, from our jobs to our leadership. And that when we have women leaders that are wanting to stand up and lead our people, that we treat them with respect. We don't put them down. I see that a lot of times where when women take these positions, a lot of times, a lot of us men, we try to put them down, and that's what I don't want to see. I want to see our people be respectful like we were taught, and that we carry each other's and we don't hold grudges against people if we have differences of opinion. It's good to disagree, but it's how we disagree and how we play it out into the public that matters. And I want to bring the respect back to the First Nations like we had from 2005 to 2009 when the Leadership Council was formed. We've strayed away from that, and I think through the leadership that I've been taught, that I believe that I could play a big part in bringing that back together to support the next regional chief of the BCAFN. Thank you.
Seconds on the clock. It's my pleasure to call forward as the last of our presenters, or candidates, pardon me, is Chief Marilyn Slett.
Good evening, everybody. I'm just really honored, and I have so much gratitude for being up here tonight with all of you, with my peers, with my colleagues here, with the young ladies that put their names forward for the female youth representative. My heart is full. You know, we are such a progressive people, and we have so much hope and so much determination. And I also want to acknowledge I'm here tonight with one of my colleagues from council, here to support me. Sorry for the emotion. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I believe in our laws. I believe in our Goy laws. That's where we get our strength. I believe in our resilience as people. In our language, I believe in our lakfe. That's our inherent jurisdiction that flows from our lands. And I know that's the common thread that brings all of us as leaders together to do the work that we do. And I have so much gratitude for the people that have taught me over the years. I've been the chief counselor for Helsik for going on 9 years, and I've been supported by so many people in our community, and so many lessons that I've learned over the years, and I'm still learning. But I do have hope and determination, and that's what I think, you know, we all move in that direction and hope to realize the dreams of our people. And I know that by working together, we can achieve that. One of the reasons why I did want to put my name forward, and I have so much gratitude for the people that supported my candidacy. In my community of Bella Bella, we've had a very strong and inspiring chapter of the Native Indian Brotherhood and Sisterhood. And I hear the stories of these people, of my ancestors, my aunts and uncles and grandparents that have worked so hard to advocate for our people, for education, for housing, for our title and rights. And I feel we have a responsibility as leadership to support and advocate and assist wherever we can with our voices. And that's where I would bring my voice from the coast, proud voice from the coast, to the BCAFN. I support the mandate of working together. I support the mandate of the progressive work that we want to do together. And I really believe that we're at a moment of history where we can make some significant changes for our communities. And I want to be a part of that. I am a part of that. And I believe that all of us together can make those changes that we're all looking for in terms of rebuilding our nations. So thank you for listening. I want to thank my colleagues here up today and wish you all luck. And Wallace Kayaksika, thank you.
Thank each and every one of you chiefs for stepping forward, for willing to have your name stand, to be contemplating taking on another duty. I know each and every one of you would serve in a great capacity. I wish each of you the best of luck in tomorrow, and thank you for taking the time to share a little bit about yourself with us today. Thank you. Thank you. So the remainder is now dedicated to calling upon our two candidates for the office of Regional Chief. So I ask Chief Maureen Chapman and Tribal Chief Terry Tiji to please join me. With this one, I have, there's a discussion. We determined to give them 8 minutes to do the presentation, hopefully which will include their platforms. And then we're going to open the floor for questions. And just as we did with our youth, female youth candidates, whoever presents first will take the first question, another person will take the question, and it goes back and forth like that. So know that they'll both be answering whatever question you put forward. So I will call upon Chief Maureen Chapman.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for staying. I was reminded on my way up here how late it is, so I'll get to it. And I'd like to acknowledge again the Musqueam territory that we're on, and thank everyone for the prayers, the songs, the dancers. Today it seems to settle the spirit and the honoring for Liz, who I worked alongside for a few years, really good friend of mine. Shotamo Ethlat, also known as Maureen Chapman, Hereditary Chief of Squelth. I want to thank also Terry, acknowledge him for putting his name forward, acknowledge the loss in his family, and out of respect for that week that Terry was away, we put our campaign on hold just to pray for them. I want to thank the BCAFN staff who have made this possible, as they have all of the past, and to my support at home. Had I not had the support of the people that work in our home office and the people that work in Stalo, the support of the tribal councils, I would not have put my name forward if I didn't think I could do this work. I want to not talk back to the elders, I'm going to speak about what the elders said in terms of why are we here? Gwen asked that question. Why do you show up every day? And then the reconciliation, our elder Bobby, who I would like to see breathe life into the work that he's done. It's at the provincial and national levels. We need to bring it into our communities and make it work for us, as with many other things that we address. You've seen my brochures, you've seen the pillars that I'm basing my campaign on, nation-based governance. We talked a lot about it today. When Minister Bennett came in, that spoke directly to it, because had we been governing ourselves in a different way, we would have met before she came. We would have prepared ourselves for the discussion instead of it going in circles as some of it did. Language and education, you heard it from our youth, you've heard it from just about everyone who has come to talk. Health and wellness, not just physical health, you've heard many of the speakers talk about mental health as well, the challenges there. Of course, economic development. That is an interest from everyone that I've spoke to, I continue to speak with. I've been involved for a number of years. I've been on the board with former Regional Chief Sean, former Regional Chief Jody, and lots of years of learning, mentored by people like that. This is a critical time, as I heard one of my colleagues speak, with the provincial and federal government, new processes that we need to look at, get out of the same thinking. And at home, I say, we don't have to do it this way just because we always have. And we've got a golden opportunity with the governments that are in place right now. I'd like to set up a mentoring table. I've heard the youth, I've heard the young leaders, I've heard the frustration, and I want to set a table for outgoing leaders, former chiefs, the new leadership, and start that discussion. How are we going to improve things? The North is always left out. How many times have we heard that? I want to propose a satellite office in the North for those communities, so we bring ministers there. We bring the meetings there. We need to, of course, address the fish farms, which has been on the front for a while. Softwood lumber, economics, gaming. This government has finally said, let's look at gaming again, whereas the former government did not. Of course, the murdered, missing Indigenous women and girls, boys and men, they're missing as well. And Elder Bobby talked about our own values and traditions. And Elder Bobby has supported me the whole way. The meaning of my name, Shwetamal Ethlat, means strong-minded and gets the work done. As your regional chief, I will show up, I will do the work, and I will stay till it's done. I will work for you and with you, all my relations.
Just get a remark that there's 2 minutes and 22 seconds left on the clock. No pressure. So Tribal Chief Terry TJ, I invite you to the...
I'll expand my speech and take her 2 minutes if you don't. Yeah. Deneza, Tsekuza, Skyza, Smorget, Simanak, Simowiget, chiefs, hereditary chiefs, youth, elders, delegates, honored guests. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the Musqueam First Nation and whose territory we're on, and to really say thank you, Masi, Tabe Masi, Masi Cho, for allowing us to do this important work for all 203 First Nations that the BC Assembly of First Nations represents. So in my journey over the last month campaigning, when this initiative came up in terms of running for the BC Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief, I went forward and talked to my 8 chiefs, and more importantly, my wife and my children about should I move forward, because this is the 3rd time I've been asked to run for regional chief. And with full endorsement of my chiefs and also my wife and children, I took the initiative and stated, yes, I'm ready. I'm going to come forward and really speak my truth of why I believe I'm the candidate, the best candidate at this point to run for the regional chief position, because over my last 9 years as the chief of the Carrier-Sicani Tribal Council, and then previous to that, the work I've done as a technical person under the forestry file, I really understand what's going on in all your communities, and I really understand the fight that we have in regards to not only economic development and land issues, but also what's going on socially. My name is Terry Tiji, and I go by the name Mukshuim Tsimgi, which is wolf with a white spot in the head. I've gained more of a white spot as I carried on this position as tribal chief. And I do represent 8 communities and over 8,000 people in the Carrier-Sicani Tribal Council territory, which is a vast area of about 80,000 square kilometers. And during that time, over the last 8 years, there have been many files that I was responsible for. And what I saw as a very proactive and great way to establish relationships was that communications with communities and our people was key. And I believe that to be properly representative of all 203 First Nations, there needs to be better communications with the BCAFN. And I think, you know, these are the initiatives that I have experienced as part of the tribal chief of the Carrier-Sicani Tribal Council. Another issue that was brought forward in terms of my responsibility was education. And far too often, many of our communities that have remote schools are underfunded. And for many years, we've been fighting for funding that is equitable to those that are off reserve. And more so in the urban communities, we've been fighting for curriculum and resources for our children to get adequate education. It's in fighting with school districts for fair representation. And far too often, in my experience in School District 57, we're brought forward and we're fighting for really something that should be there already in terms of development of curriculum and resources. I have a long history in economic development. Many of the resource extractive industries that have proposed projects through our territory, whether it was oil pipelines and the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline, the many pipelines that were purported to come forward in regards to the liquefied natural gas boom, mining, and my experience in forestry, which probably has the biggest footprint in our territories. I have a background in forestry. I'm a registered professional forester. And I have a really good understanding in all of our fights in terms of really bringing forward our issues. And one of the initiatives that we negotiated in terms of resource extraction was a collaboration agreement with the province of BC, and also another agreement called the Pathway Forward Agreement. These agreements really allowed us to assert our rights, title, and interests in regards to environmental assessments, looking at stewardship issues because of all the cumulative impacts that are happening within our territory, and also access to impact benefit agreements. In regards to revenue sharing, we have approximately 20% revenue sharing in regards to stumpage. We've also have an initiative for carbon crediting. And more importantly, as it states in Article 28 of the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People, we have an opportunity now for redress. With the last Liberal government, we have them agreeing to compensation for what has already been extracted in our traditional territories. There's been approximately $2.6 billion in stumpage taken out, and we stated we want half. So that is a negotiation. And I think these are real opportunities that should be really brought forward. I know a lot of your communities have great agreements, and all of these should be brought forward, and perhaps this is where the BCAFN plays its role. So in conclusion, another initiative that we've been really advocating for is missing and murdered Indigenous women. My history there goes back to 1991 when I first lost a relative, a cousin in the downtown east side, a cousin in 94 on the Highway of Tears, and another distant relative who was DNA and fingerprints were found in a picnic farm. And as I go through this journey over the last month, and you all know the losses I experienced with my niece and to cancer, and my nephew to a hunting accident, and my uncle who passed away from a stroke. And I want to thank Maureen for the phone call. I want to thank you all for the many thoughts, prayers, and many of those words of wisdom and the acknowledgement of the grief and the pain that my family experienced. And I just want to acknowledge, my sisters, Mary, who lost her only son, Marilyn, who lost her daughter to this terrible disease that is ovarian cancer that will affect unsuspecting some women. That she really brought it forward in terms of highlighting the issue of the ovarian cancer. I think I'm taking her 2 minutes, so I'll keep an eye. Just kidding. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, and I want to acknowledge Maureen for putting her name forward, and I hope I gain your confidence as the regional chief of BC. Merci.
That comment, when it was first made about the adding minutes, reminded me of last year's Gathering Wisdom, when I think there was a stacking of minutes with a particular motion. I think Chief Spahan, you were involved in that, and Chief Harvey McLeod. It was a fun little moment to relive. Microphone 13. So as Chief Maureen, you spoke first. You'll take this first question. The question will then go to Tribal Chief Terry, and then the next question will go first to Tribal Chief Terry, and then Chief Maureen, and back and forth. So know that both candidates will be responding to the question. We're more or less going to do the same difference. We're looking around a 3-minute answer. So please proceed on microphone 4. Is it 14, 15?
13. 13.
13.
Cooksham, Cookbeat Ryan Bonaparte Indian Band, Sequem Nation. Thank you both for your speeches. Before I ask you a question, I just want to say thank you to the 2 young ladies who spoke earlier. That was really inspiring in how you spoke, and you really were a hard act to follow for all of the I guess elder politicians that followed you. But you were absolutely excellent, and as Chief of Bonaparte Indian Band, whomever gets elected, please don't hesitate to call upon me for support or anything that you want to get started, or initiatives. And I hope that the rest of our chiefs do that also. To the candidates here, and I guess the board members and everybody who's running for anything today, we're in a momentum of things in each of our organizations. And we keep talking about the great opportunity that we have with these governments. Yet we're still trundling along in our organizations, and I am feeling, or I guess the comments that I've had with a few different chiefs in our tribal council, and that is, I spoke to you, Terry, on the phone, and I've talked to Chief Maureen as well, and I'll be honest with my comments to those chiefs is that I've been uninspired, I guess. I'm not sure that I'm looking for a super dynamic person that's going to take us to the next level, but if we're in this time of change, of great opportunity, what I'm looking for is someone with big ideas, someone who's going to inspire, somebody who is going to be bold and take us there, or have some ideas that are new, not that, well, we'll keep moving along with what we're doing, and because there's a great opportunity here, things are going to change magically, because I don't have a huge amount of faith that's what's going to happen, and I realize that I'm accountable for that change as well. However, I'm cognizant of the fact that we only have so much influence as community chiefs, or as nation leaders or nations together. So to get to my question, I'm asking of you, what is something bold that you can do? What can you do to change a trajectory or take this opportunity? What are you going to do that's different? I mean, I know you have a lot of experience, Chief Chapman, and Terry, you have a lot of experience too in what you've done back home. But there's other things that need to be done that we're not doing here. We don't have the capacity at the community level, at the nation level. Heck, we don't even have the capacity at the provincial level to match the brain power and the work that's going on at the province and so on. And I'm speaking about, I'll give an example of economics, because that's my background and that's what I'm trained in. All we're talking about is economic development. We're not talking about economic systems. We're not talking about developing banking. We're not talking about borrowing. We're not talking about issuing bonds. We're not doing any of the depth of our work that we're doing is not there. I want to hear about that stuff. I want to hear how we're going to take this to the next level, because we really do need it. And if we can't do it, who are we going to bring in to do it? Because I'll stop it at that. But please, if you could find the question in that. Cook's Challenge.
So I'm just, because that was a bit of the question that I heard in all that, because there was a lot there, was bold moves, whether it's yourself or who would you bring in, or how that would look. I don't know if we were looking for naming names. And I'm going to ask kindly, as that was the first example, of a question. I am looking specifically for questions right now to our candidates, because so that we can be very clear what they're asking. Thank you. So, microphone 3, please.
Well, thank you, Cookby, for your question. Big ideas, inspire, bold. What will you do different? We've done some small steps in moving away from the Indian Act. I think we need to do more there. I would like to set tables with experts like yourself and do that brainstorming, help each other to get to those answers, to those questions that you've had for us. I'm inspired by our young leaders who came up here today and presented, and there's many more of them. So setting the table, if we have to do it regionally, to begin moving that needle along, if you will. The answer's in our communities. The change needs to happen within our policies, the structures, the procedures that we're in that box, thinking outside that box, and being brave enough to be able to do that. We need resources, we need funding to be able to do a lot of this work. But I know that if we can do this together, we will arrive at those solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Really, we're moving away from mere consultation. We're moving to consent. And I think we're no longer in this world where we're asking for permission. So to me, some of the things that what we've done and we should be doing throughout this province is really implementing our own laws we've codified our own water laws in the Carrier-Sicani. And it's being looked at, it's been really implemented with certain companies within the traditional territory. They've actually agreed to follow our water laws because it's higher standards in the province of BC. And I think the more that we can come together, and this is really the experience that I've had as working for 8 communities, is that when we're disciplined and we work together, that we really get things done in terms of initiating our own laws and our own decisions on the land. And, you know, to get to a place where we have 20% stumpage, it took discipline and working together. And I think that's really where, if we come together, and just imagine 203 First Nations working together, I think we could be leaders, not only in British Columbia law, but leaders in this whole country. Let's see.
So the next question will be going to you, Travel Chief Terry, and then I'll go to Chief Marine. And that was microphone number 20, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to disappoint Grand Chief Doug Kelly and not ask a question about fish farms.
I think I just fell over.
I know, right? My question relates to land use planning. The Great Barrier Rainforest Land Use Plan has been developed and legislated and implemented. And there were a large number of First Nations that did not participate in that effort. And as a result of that and the realignment of the timber supply areas, there is enhanced pressure down in the southern TSA and specifically on nations that were not involved. And to the point where it's almost triple the average per cubic meter of the overall Great Barrier Rainforest. And so how would you propose addressing that? Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So, you know, we've experienced similar pressures in terms of, it wasn't necessarily initiatives such as the Great Barrier Rainforest, but more in regards to forest health. We all know about the mountain pine beetle attack and how it really pressured the southern part of the Carrier-Sicani to artificially increase the annual allowable cut. So I think, you know, once we have your own specific land codes, I know a lot of our communities have initiated our own in terms of land use plans and also land codes and all these different initiatives. Land use planning is probably one of the most important ways we can make decisions as it relates back to our cultures. And one of the biggest issues that we had in terms of the increase of the AAC was waterways. And we all know how important waterways are in regards to water quality, fish, what have you. So I would propose that when there are increases in annual allowable cuts, is that you initiate your ideas, your laws in the timber supply review. So right now, this is one thing that we're doing in the PGTSA, where we have been involved for the last 2 years in regards to the timber supply review. There was good intentions there, but yet they're still making decisions in regards to where our concerns are. So I think the province has committed to going through these processes, but I think collectively we really have to push the agenda with the province in regards to whatever it is, and whether it's reducing the AAC or increasing the AAC. We need to be involved in regards to those decision-making processes, because right now that's really what free, prior, and informed consent means to me, is that these major decisions, whether it's forestry or environmental assessments, we have to be fully involved. They need our blessing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Chamberlain, for the question. And I guess, first of all, I would gather those impacted, because I'm not that familiar with this. Like you said, those that didn't participate initially are being pressured. So bringing people together so that we can gather that information to prepare for a meeting with the ministers, those that we need to bring to the table to discuss this. That's the starting point for me. And just in land use planning. I mean, there's a number of communities that are involved in the land code that have done nothing but help the communities and open doors to other opportunities. So thank you, Chief Chamberlain.
So the next question will be going to you first, Chief Maureen, and then over to Tribal Chief. And that would be coming from microphone number 12.
Sorry, I fell asleep. I am Chief Willie Blackwater from Cayuga First Nation. One of the things that I've noticed in last few years, especially last 2 years, a bit more, coming to the Chiefs tables and BCAFN, Union BC Chiefs and BCAFN, the summit and stuff like that, is that listening and to the governments and stuff like that, and to the chiefs. And one of the things that I've taken a keen note on and noticing is that government has initiated their dump and run, dumping everything on First Nations. So my question to the both of you is, I think one of the key things that we in the North have been actually been moving toward is jurisdictional over, first of all, child families, and we want to go into similar to that with health, education, economic development, stuff like that, because that gives each community their own inherent right to look after everything that is owned by them, and to develop their own education, health, and child and family services sector, and economic development, and all that. So I just want to see what both of your thoughts are around that perspective.
I'd like to ask a clarifying question, if you don't mind. I didn't quite get what you meant by dumping money on First Nations.
Oh no, it's just they're dumping their onus of slowly alleviating their responsibilities on First Nations and stuff like that. So it's I think what we're looking at is moving toward a jurisdictional aspect within our nation.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Sorry, I wasn't clear on what you were asking. And yes, the jurisdiction, absolutely, and I know that you're clearly involved with children and families, heavily involved with that. But we need to get the resources to come along with it. I mean, we are all about having authority and jurisdiction in many, many fields, like across the board, but we also need to have the resources to be able to do that, because that's where we fall down, and that's what government does. And when they do throw money at us, it's not enough to do anything with. In terms of just today with Minister Bennett, no disrespect to what she was presenting, but it's just another deflection on, I think, a more serious issue. And what are we going to do with $30,000 in each of our communities? And one, I think, positive side to that is we're all looking to work collectively, jointly, to see how we can put that money to work as a tribal council, or maybe we fan out even further and see if we can stretch that money, but not let them off the hook, because I mean it's just a token again. So I hope I answered your question, Chief. Thank you.
So I think really we have to look at what exactly where the jurisdiction is coming from, especially in terms federally. There's a fiduciary duty to our communities where the governments are on the hook for a lot of the issues that we're dealing with. But provincially, there's an allocation of funding for each child in education. I think we should be taking more jurisdiction, more governance over where those funds are going to. Because I know full well in the Prince George and area, School District 57, we know the allocation of funding isn't getting to our kids. We know that there's still graduation rates less than 60% when the average graduation rate is a matter of fact, around 85, 90%. So I think in child and family services jurisdiction, we're creating at the Carrier-Sakani, we're creating ones that are specific to the communities, where there are intervention measures and also policy changes in terms that specific to each community. So we can really intervene there and make sure that our children aren't leaving our communities. And I think in the devolution of a lot of this governance can be really, I guess, beneficial, but at the same time, you know, there has to be, we have to look at where are we letting them off the hook on the fiduciary duty. So, and another one is probably DFO. I really believe that a lot of us at this table talk about the devolution of Department of Fisheries and Oceans because we know full well that a lot of the management is leading to extinction of many of our species and of salmon. So I think, you know, that's it could be beneficial, but we have to be careful at the same time. We'll see.
So the next question will be coming straight to you, Tribal Chief, and then over to Chief Marine. And that question will be coming from microphone number 16, please.
Cookstrom, Lee Spahan, Chief of the Coldwater Indian Band. Thank you. As you know, there's action happening on the north coast with the occupation of the fish farms. So 2 questions is, are you going to be attending that occupation to show support for the leadership? And for the second one, as you heard me today ask the question to the minister, that question, it follows up on what Coldwater is doing to protect the water aquifer in my backyard. And I get my direction from my council, and my council gets my direction from my membership. But the question has come up. I've done interviews, and they've asked if Coldwater will be the next Standing Rock. There was clear direction from the membership that if there's impacts to our water, we're going to stand up for it. So the question is, would you support us? If so, how would you occupy that land with us to stop the pipeline? Cookstrom.
Thank you. That's you know, one of the things that I've been doing as a tribal chief for the Carrie-Sakani, and you know, fighting oil pipelines when it didn't really meet the test of our communities, which was really important. The Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline. We did an Aboriginal interest and use study on it. It was more or less an EA. In regards to that project, and we really had to assert our rights, title, and interest to our lands. So if you have to stand up and protect your rights to the land and the decisions that you made, yes, I would be there. And I think, you know, this comes back to a question of the BCAFN and how can it be more of a voice? How can it be more politicized in terms of whether it's development and regardless of what development it is? I think, you know, whether it's oil pipelines, LNG, mining, I think those projects that have major implication needs to stand the test of our First Nations communities to look at those projects. And if there are, you know, these companies and government come in and aren't acknowledging your decision, then you have to stand up, and so do we all have to. We all have to stand up at some point. And I recall when I was in Copenhagen with the AFN in regards to the Conference of the Party of the climate change, you know, I was there with 100,000 people standing up for climate justice for not just Canadian First Nations, but I think for Indigenous people around the world. And I think that's, you know, sometimes we have to do that, and sometimes we have to back up each other. I see.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Lee, for your questions. And I agree, because when it gets to the point where you're going to have to stand up and demonstrate or protest, you've exhausted all of your other avenues. You've tried negotiating, you've done whatever you could. And if there's no other recourse, of course, support the First Nations. That's part of the job of the regional chief, to support the First Nations where they are and in what their efforts are and what they're doing. We had to fight against leader mining in our backyard because they were going to destroy our watershed, and they're not there because people stood with us as well to protest that. So thank you for your question.
So I'll go to you, Chief Maureen.
Yep.
Okay. And that will be a question coming from microphone 14, please.
Byron Lewis, Chief Okanagan Band. This question, I think you've probably heard me around the floor a number of times bring this up. And one of the positions that I really believe us as First Nations need to get involved in is international trade. And one of the things I've always said was that, you know, that all international agreements are subject to domestic law, and that domestic law includes Aboriginal title and rights. And we all know that all title and rights have possess an economic component. So my question is each one of you, as you know, what I see you as ambassadors for our nations, how do you propose to actually get us to access international trade and be participants in that?
Thank you, Chief Byron. And we have talked a fair bit about getting involved in the international trade. And you're an expert. I know that because I've worked with you on this. And to get to the tables, like the tables that we need to meet at, we spoke earlier about the avenues. It may not be the ministers that I think, but drawing on the people that have been working in this field, advocating as the regional chief at not only the national level alongside national chief, but international. And we've got a number of chiefs here that have been involved with the UN and different entities. So I would want to draw on the expertise that is around the table to get us moving. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Good question. You know, whether it's NAFTA, the discussions that are happening with the United States, with President Donald Trump, who is has a very protectionist attitude towards not only Canada but Mexico. But we've also have a real opportunity here in regards to the softwood lumber agreement. And right now, John Horgan is stating that there should be a seat at the table for an Indigenous person or an Indigenous group. And really, I think perhaps the BCAFN, perhaps the Leadership Council, and perhaps the First Nations Forestry Council, and maybe get the National Aboriginal Forestry Association involved. I used to be the British Columbia representative on the National Aboriginal Forestry Association, and currently it's RPF Lenny Joe. So I think, you know, years ago when I left university in 2005, 2006, 2007, when there was a 20% take back of many of the tenures, many of our RPFs came together and we really talked about at that table that softwood lumber agreement in terms of the negotiations well over 12 years ago. So right now we have a good opportunity. We have a seat at the table. Let's get working and let's figure out a plan to go to those tables to figure out what we should do in regards to the softwood lumber agreement. Because right now I can agree with the United States that many of the companies are being subsidized because quite simply they haven't dealt with the First Nations issues in the province of BC. And another avenue is perhaps the Jay Treaty, where, you know, the United States is a signatory, but Canada isn't. So we could freely trade with our Native American relatives down in the United States. So I think there are some real initiatives that can be had right now,
And that's really what I would do if elected as BCAFN. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 8, please. That will go to you.
Thank you. You guys mentioned the resources like forestry, mining, and human resources such as jobs. I was wondering if you have a guesstimate of the resources, and can you share with us like how much has your position brought in financially, and how many jobs were created? Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. I used to be the president of a training society called PTB ASEP, and originally that used to be, if you all recall, the ASEP programs became the SPF programs, and approximately anywhere in the neighborhood of about $24 million for training. And with the training dollars, we trained approximately 1,500 people along the route of Highway 16, many of the First Nations communities along the highway, and about 980, I believe it was, the exact numbers, how many that got jobs. So, you know, that's the numbers that I recall when we were really implementing many of the discussions that we had with the pipelines, the LNG pipelines, the mining companies, and forestry companies. So really that's one of the initiatives that began, that was born out of the Carrier-Sicani Tribal Council and Haisla First Nations, and eventually all the communities gathered together to create this initiative that is the PTB ASEP. Been involved with Pignata for many years, and we created a lot of jobs there. Don't know exactly the exact numbers there, but really that's where, when we work together, there's really a strong ability to create more capacity for our communities and more jobs for our people to take those jobs more specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Vivian, for your question. And admittedly, I'm not knowledgeable enough to respond to your question. I'm not going to pretend I know and be able to quote numbers to you, but I will certainly follow up and gain more information on that. So thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 15, and this question will be going first to Chief Maureen, and then followed up by Tribal Chief Terry.
Chief Judy Wilson, Nisgaana, the Squat Nation. The question I have, and I really think it's rooted on, and this is the question I asked earlier, Minister Bennett, is the foundation that we're dealing with the change for the nation-to-nation relationship and this new era that we're in, is the implementation of the United Nations Declarations of the Rights of the Indigenous Peoples. The question I have is, what do you see as the foundation? Because we have, you know, the unilateral development of the 10 principles. We have, you know, the province saying they're going to engage us, but I want to know what you believe is the foundation to make those substantive changes that we need on all of these areas, because if we don't have that foundation, we really have nothing.
Thank you, Chief. Judy, for your question. And I heard your comments earlier to the Minister around the 10 principles that were created without us. And I think the key to the foundation for a nation-to-nation relationship is talking to the communities. We need to get to the source of what's going on, because it's like we get things told to us. We get reports given to us, and we're not part of it. And this new government, our provincial government, for example, each of the meetings during the cabinet session, what we said to every one of the ministers that we met with is, you can't be doing this and then presenting it to us after the fact. We need to be at the table from the very beginning, be part of the decision making, coming from what our communities are telling us the issues are. So for the nation to nation, I believe that, that we need to go to the communities and get the accurate information that will build that foundation for us to be able to do the work as political leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. And, you know, one of the things that I think we should acknowledge here is the work that Jody has done in terms of the governance toolkit, and especially in the nation-to-nation regards to Canada. And now there's the 10 principles. So I think in her, in her wisdom, I think she's really creating a path for us to go down. And I think the door is open now. We have to knock that door down and really take advantage of what she's created. And I think, you know, really we have to breathe life into many of these things, whether it's the Truth and Reconciliation Commission or UNDRIP or FPIC. And the more that we can work together in regards to ourselves as nation to nation, the more treaties we have amongst ourselves. We have one with the Casca Dene to really acknowledge our shared area and acknowledge the existence of our you know, tribes, if you will, from the north to the south. So really creating those places where we can create that nation to nation and have friendship treaties amongst ourselves would really create strong ties and really push forward our agenda together. And I think that's really important.
So to take us home, we're going to go to microphone number 20.
Bob put me on the spot here. He pointed at me, so he's playing a trick on me, but I'll ask a question anyway. Andy Phillips Scowlitz. I'd like to also acknowledge the two young ladies also before I'd like to acknowledge the words that you spoke. It was very eloquent. You're true leaders already. Keep doing what you're doing. It's very encouraging, very inspiring. I'd like to ask the potential candidates to ask what does reconciliation mean to you as an individual?
So first answer will be Tribal Chief Terry Teachy.
Thank you. That's a really important question in terms of what does reconciliation mean. And this is one of the things that I believe that we all have to define. I think we can't have a cookie cutter blanket definition of what reconciliation means. And I know for my communities and my organizations, we are defining what reconciliation means. And one of the things that we're doing is we're actually providing these principles to the provincial government to really implement not just the good intentions of what those mandate letters were. Those are just on paper. They're just good intentions. We have to set the path of what reconciliation means. And for reconciliation to breathe life in it, it's decision making. It's full acknowledgement of our governance. It's acknowledging that we have a distinct culture in CSTC, and we need to be really our decisions, whether it's land, education, health, we have the autonomy to make these decisions. We should have enough respect between these government-to-government relations where we're really implementing our own governments and no longer asking for permission. We're doing it. And I think really to breathe life into what that term means, what that word means, that's what reconciliation to me means, is really going back to our roots as Indigenous people, to my roots as a carrier Daket person, and implementing what has gone through many, many generations in our laws that we believe in. That's what reconciliation means. Merci.
Thank you, Chief Andy. And reconciliation to me, we've been talking about it for a long time, and my question is, where am I at in terms of reconciliation? We talk often at these national, international, provincial tables, and if we're not looking at reconciling ourselves where we are in our community, we bring the same mindset to the tables. And if we're not looking differently at what reconciliation means and educating the other governments about what it is, nothing's going to change. Here, going back to Cookby Day and what's going to be different? If we keep doing the same things, we're going to have the same outcomes. So setting up, I'd like to draw on our expert, Bobby, our elder Bobby, to begin this work in our communities and coming and working with our communities on reconciliation, what that looks like. Going back to our laws, going back to our culture, that being the basis, and look forward to that work, actually. And since we're bringing it home here, I've just want to advise everybody before we adjourn that we've got a little gathering in the atrium at the end of the hall here for about an hour. If you'd like to come, opportunity for you to hear from my nominators, and we've cut it down to an hour because I know Terry has also got something scheduled to allow people if they wish to attend both. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much to both our candidates for coming forward to present and be put on the spot. And thanks to each and every one of you. There was 8 excellent exchanges due to the questions that you asked. And I'd like to thank you all, and I'd like to take my foot out of my mouth to Cookby Ryan Day, and I apologize for that. And just before you go, as you can see, we are blessed again for our closing. And I'd like to encourage you and remind you there will be breakfast here. It was a full breakfast this morning. There will be a good breakfast again here. You can see how well they treat us at lunchtime. We are going to start at 8:30 a.m., but the polls will be open at 8. So if you want to get in, vote, eat breakfast, and we're going to get rolling at 8:30. That resolution that we pushed back, we're going to hear about that report on sustainable economic development tomorrow, as well as Indigenous languages, emergency management, fisheries, and we will also have Minister of Justice, Attorney General of Canada, Jody Wilson-Raybould with us, as well as climate change, homelessness, housing strategy, technology, justice, all the things that we all hold dear to our heart. So I really look forward to see you tomorrow, so we will recess until tomorrow. But before we do, we're going to get a blessing on our way for this evening. Thank you very much.
Long day for everyone, so I'll just get right into the song and safe travels back home.
gotta say. Thank you so much to you both. Thank you. Yeah.